Hello, this is Gary, and in this video I'm going to show you how to animate your 360-degree camera footage shot on, say, a GoPro Max using Blender, which is a free open-source 3D animation software. Now, this method is a bit more complicated than others, but it gives you the most creative freedom. And this is not recommended for a beginner to Blender, but I'm going to assume that you have some knowledge of Blender. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to play back the footage in real time and have your reframing motions with your mouse recorded. Then we will decimate those keys and clean up our animation curves. We will also animate the focal length, and we will animate the sphere to simulate various parallax and camera movement shifts. I will show you how to fake a slight movement of the camera as well, which, remember, this is going to be all nodal camera pans, but you can still achieve a very slight camera position change in post if you do it at the right times and in a subtle amount. So again, this is not a beginner friendly tutorial. However, if you have some knowledge in Blender, you may find that this is the best way to animate 360-degree footage. Let's get started. Let's set up a workspace for editing 360-degree footage. So I'm just going to delete the default cube and add a UV sphere. I'm going to press F9 and double my segments to 64 and my rings to 32. We're going to right click and go to shade smooth so we can clean up our normals. I'm going to press S10 enter. We've now scaled up our sphere by 10 times. Let's go ahead and bring up our shader editor. And we're going to create a new material for this object. So if I just press new up here, we've created a principled BSDF. Now that would be fine. You could plug in the video file into the emission portion, but we're going to make this a lot simpler. We're just going to create an emission shader. So you can see, you can plug emission into surface, and if I change the color, nothing happens. We're just going to press the Z hotkey, the Z marking menu, and go to material preview. Again, I assume that you are not a beginner in Blender, but anyways, let's go ahead and add an image with Shift A, image texture, and let's plug that into our color. And now we will load up our Proxy video that we created with, say, Handbrake or another program. I created proxies for my 360-degree footage because I don't want Blender to be slowed down. So let's go and go to our proxy. We're going to go ahead and there it is. So let's open it up. There we go. Now, we don't know how many frames it is right now, but to see how many frames it is, just go to the video sequencer and drag the proxy in like this. So I recommend dragging till you see the starting frame at 1 down there. Now this is 309 frames, so we'll go ahead and set our end time here to 309. Alright, and our starting frames here, or the amount of frames I should say, is 309 or 309. There we go. Now if we play this back, we have our sound, but we do not have any motion here. That's because we need to click auto refresh. You can now see movement within this sphere. See? Okay, excellent. Now, the next step would be you might want to see the waveform of this video file. So let's go up here and click waveform on. Now we can see the waveform of the audio. And again, this is just a simple M4V file that I rendered in Handbrake from my original 360-degree footage, and I used an MP3 encoding for my audio. So you don't really need a high-end format, just MP3, and Blender will read it just fine when we're doing our preview here. This footage is a bit incorrect. It is mirrored. So let's go to our sphere, and let's go ahead and set our scale to -10. Now our footage is being played back correctly. Let's go and lock down our scale transforms. Now you can see that as I play it back, we actually have everything looking pretty good. However, let's go to our main camera if we press 0, and I'm going to now, I've got my lock camera to view in my quick favorites, but if you don't know how to do that, let's press in, go to view, and then you can see over here lock camera to view. And now I can maneuver the camera around. This is the main camera that will be rendered. What I want to do is I want to take this camera and make sure we select the camera, and we want to center it. And also I'm going to set the focal length to like 15. So let's go back to our transforms. I usually set that to like 0, for example. And what I'm going to do is I'm also going to get rid of, well, let's go and set our location back to 0. And let's go and lock down the location. So now our camera is locked down. We cannot move it. We can only rotate by using the middle mouse button here. Okay. Now, I'm going to go to the camera settings again, viewport display, and the passport 2. I'm going to bring that up to about 0.9 so that we have some darkening here on the frame. And I'm pressing the T button to get rid of these, the toolbar here. And I'm also going to get rid of the navigation thing here. And also we can get rid of our tool settings too. Let's go and bring up our graph editor. And we may want to make this just a little bit bigger. Let's bring up the graph editor. And press N to get rid of that. Now you can adjust your workspace however you like. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the image editor here with the render view here, the render result. So I press F12, we get a final render. And then over here we will have, we select our sphere, we will have the material here. Now, I'm going to show you something in a second. What we're going to do is zoom in on our material. We're going to create another 3D view. So this will be our 3D viewport. We're going to get rid of the tool settings as well as our overlays. And actually we can just hide all of this over here and then go back to our material preview by pressing the Z hotkey. Now over here you can see that if I want to select anything else, it disappears, right? So let's go back to our sphere and let's pin the material so that if we select anything else, the material of course stays there. We also can delete this light because we don't need a light in the scene. And just to be safe, let's go to our world settings and set our color down to 0. So we have no indirect illumination influence. Now, go to our render settings, and before we continue on, I just want to go and get rid of this annoying thing here. Now, the reason why this is appearing is because we actually have our sequence editor open, and it's applying the sequence edit over here. It's actually applying this video here to the end of our render. So let's go to our post-processing and turn off the sequencer. And if you want to, you can also turn off compositing. Now, if you press F12, you can see we get the proper render. Let's go ahead and go to our render settings. We're going to be using the Eevee render engine, which is based on the GPU. It's going to be much faster. Our render samples, we could set that to 16. Our viewport samples could be 4. We can turn off viewport denoising. We can leave off all the other settings at default, except motion blur, and enable that. That'll give us the 180-degree motion blur by default. However, you can change this however you wish, or you can disable it, whatever you want. But I'm using the 180-degree motion blur in this because it's going to be useful. And the camera, every time I move, do a pan movement, the motion blur will be baked in. So it actually looks quite professional. Now, on color management, you do not want to be seeing anything like Filmic or anything like this because it will be changing the colors of your footage. Just make sure that you're using the standard result as well as no look here. If you imported Rec 709 footage, you want to export out the Rec 709 footage so that you can do your color grading in DaVinci Resolve or any other program, even Blender if you wish to. So if you find yourself using Blender to edit a lot of 360-degree footage and you have created a workspace that you like, you can simply duplicate that workspace. So we've edited layout here. We can duplicate this and type in, say, 360-degree editing. So now I've actually deleted the layout workspace that we edited, and I'm going to add General Layout, and we're going to right click and reorder to front. And now we've got our layout workspace as well as our 360-degree editing. We go back to the layout here, we can go to File and go to Defaults, Save Startup File. So that way you can actually have a 360-degree editing workspace in Blender to start with. Now with all that said and out of the way, let's go ahead and drag our proxy in here. I drag this to about 1, to where it says 1 over there. Okay, we know it's 309 frames. So now let's go ahead and set our end time not to 309, but to 340. Now I like to go roughly 30 frames ahead, or at least a second. So at 24 frames per second, 30 frames is a little more than a second. But I like to go at least a second ahead because, well, you'll see why in a few minutes. So let's press home on the graph editor to center that up. And you can see that we've got our sound now, as you can see. It's going to load up, and of course we've used waveform display on, so we can see our audio. Let's load up this as well. So we see it's 309 frames, so let's set our frames to 309. And you can see auto refresh is automatically on here because we did not delete this image texture node. So if we go ahead and play it back, you can see that we are playing it back in the viewport perfectly. So the first thing we're going to do is use fly navigation to get an interactive camera reframing done with auto key. I will also show you how to clean up that footage, clean up those keyframes, and we'll add a few other things to it like the noise modifiers. However, I will also show you a different method. It's similar to walk navigation, but it works a little better. Let's go and do the fly navigation first. Now, you can see that I have added about a second here to the end, and that is specifically for these methods. So what we're going to do is you can see that when the footage ends, it goes back and loops to the beginning again if I press the space bar to play. So what we want to do is fly navigation, you can see, is right here. However, I've added it to my quick favorites. You just right click it in the menu and add to quick favorites. Press Q to access quick favorites. You can also right click any quick favorite to remove it, or right click it and then choose remove from quick favorites. I'm going to position the camera where I want it to be, roughly where I want it to be to start. And then I'm going to go to the very end. You can't just choose fly navigation and then press play. You have to press play and then fly navigation. This is why we have a second to react here. Spacebar Q and then fly navigation, all within a second. So you have time. Okay, so now before we press the pause or the spacebar button to stop the playback, I press left click to confirm my edits. Now I'm going to press home over here in the graph editor. You can see we've got a lot of curves here. Let's go ahead and go to key, decimate them using the ratio method. I usually go around 95 or so, and I'm just going to press the V button, the V hotkey, to auto clamp these, which may actually not be the best choice. Okay, for everything. Now this came out pretty good, but if you don't like your edits, you can of course do some tweaking. Now, you can see here we've got some issues. You can see that there's a few too many keys. So we can delete these by pressing the X button. And then we can V to auto clamp, Shift R to continue that. And you could also say if you had a lot of keys, you can select a bunch and then decimate just the ones that you want to decimate. And if you want to repeat an operation, you press Shift R. So now let's go ahead and delete these over here, these last keys that we do not need. So now we can finally change this to 309, which is the actual amount of frames in our sequence here. So let's go and press this play button again and see what we think. But I know I want this to be moving a little bit more, so I'm going to press and go to V and choose vector, and then move that out of the way. I'll mention that a bit more in a second. So now let me go over some keyframe editing tips here. If you want to scale your keys on like the X-axis, you press S and X. If you want to scale them in the up and down axis, you press S and Y. However, there's a more advanced method. You can use a gesture-based method, so you press S and then hold down the middle mouse button and gesture your mouse in the direction that you want to constrain the scaling axis to. So let's do that. Let's press S and then middle mouse button and gesture towards the left or the right. And now we've constrained our scale movement, our scaling to the X-axis. Let's press the play button. So now I'm going to just press G, and again I'm going to use gesturing to move it. I can go back over here. I want to move this a little bit. And then move this, and we may want to go back to auto clamp. and then auto clamp that. That actually is not going to look too good, to be honest there. There we go. Alright, so if you want to, say, scale about just this, you can use the dope sheet. Now, the dope sheet can be accessed with Control Tab. You can see we've got it right here. So you can simply press Control Tab again, select all these keys here, Control Tab, and then press S. And you do not need to constrain here at all. You can go ahead and constrain or just scale something like that. So let's go back to Control Tab. I'm going to press Control Z to undo that. And we're going to press Control S to save it. So let's go ahead and animate the focal length now. So we've selected our camera. We're going to go to our focal length. I'm going to change this to 32. So I would like to start off a bit tight in here. Now, let's go and play that back and see what it looks like. Okay, so I feel that we could have just a little bit more movement on the right. So let's go ahead and select this key, which as you can see controls that. Let's go and select these two keys, move them up a little bit, and then clean that up as well. And auto clamp that. Actually, bad idea. You need to be very careful with how much you use that. Let's go ahead and vector that. That's pretty good. Now, let's go and right about right here, we're going to create a keyframe for our focal length. And we're going to just go over here to where we reveal the drummer. We're going to set this to about 14. Or maybe 16. And we're going to scale that out a little bit so it's a bit more extreme at the end. And now I would like to zoom in over here. So let's go ahead and lock this keyframe down and zoom in to the end. Alright, right here. We're going to zoom into about, I'm going to try 30. That looks pretty good. Maybe 31. And we'll lock, and it's already locked down automatically. And I also want to do another nice, smooth zooming in. May want to go over a little bit. Actually, I would like to start out sooner. And I like that. That looks good. So we've animated our focal length. So now we're going to animate the location and or the rotation of the sphere itself to fake some additional movements, perspective movements with our camera, such as maybe a minor shift in the actual position of the camera. This is an illusion, of course, and you need to do it in a subtle way and in the right times, or else it can be revealed that it's completely fake. But let's go ahead and try it. So we're going to move the camera, and I just moved my position here. Move the camera up a little bit to start. I'm going to go over here, and we can use auto key, that's fine. Now let's play it back. So as the camera is moving, I want to move it down just a little bit. And now we've got auto key. Let's press home. So let's see how that looks. It looked like the camera was actually moving down in real physical space, which it wasn't, but it's an illusion. And as far as I know, nobody on YouTube talks about anything like this. So nobody edits 360-degree video like this, and this is a really powerful way to get more out of your 360-degree shots. So let's continue on. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to try to move the camera a little bit back to give him some more space. Let's play it and see how it looks. Now I'm going to anchor those keyframes down by just selecting all of these keyframes and pressing Shift D and then middle mouse gesturing to constrain this movement to the x-axis. There we go. And let's go and play that back. I may want this to take just a little bit longer. There we go. And now let's go ahead and zoom in here. May want to change the perspective just a little bit and see what we can do. Let's Let's try this. It's very subtle, but it might be interesting. I kind of like that. It works. So now I'm going to add the noise modifier to give us a little bit of camera shake. It can be useful, but you don't want to overdo it. But of course, it depends on the shot. So let's go ahead and select our camera. Go to our X Euler rotation. Let's go to our modifiers and add a noise modifier. So let's look at that. You can see that the noise modifier has created a lot of jagginess to our X axis. So we can control the scale. We can control the strength. So I do think the strength should be quite a bit low. I'm going to keep it a bit high right now so that you can see what it does. But what we're going to do is over here, when the camera pans like this, I want there to be some camera shake. So we're going to restrict to about right here. This is where we're going to start, about 125. Let's restrict the frame range to start at 125. And we will end it at about 190. And we'll have a blend out of 30 and a blend in of about 20. We'll save it. Let's go and start that at about 130. Let's look at it again. It's very subtle. And now on the Z-axis, what we could do is we could just copy this modifier and put it on the Z-axis as well. Let's play it back. It added a little bit of subtle camera shake. I like that. And of course, you can stack these up and have ones that affect just camera rotations, and then you can maybe have one for general handheld camera movement or camera handheld motion throughout the entire shot. So I think it's very useful to do this, and it can definitely add a little bit more life to your 360-degree shot. So now we're ready to render this out. So all we have to do is load up the original file, so the high quality version, and we have to go to open image and change our frame back to 309. And now, of course, in our render settings, we want to, choose a destination location, of course. And usually in Blender, when you're doing 3D animation, you render out an image sequence, but here we're going to actually use Blender's built-in video encoder to render out a video. So we're going to choose follow scene for the color management. We're going to just keep it real simple here, a quick time video, H.264 perceptually lossless, so basically really, really high quality. And as you can see, my audio codec is very simple here, MP3, because again, this is just, we're using the original audio from the event here. We're not using this. This is just more of a scratch audio for editing. And then, of course, if you really wanted to render a much higher quality version, you could use DNX HD. There's so many options here. You can even do lossless video. You could even render out an image sequence if you wanted to. But here, H.264, really high quality is going to be good enough. And now we're ready to go ahead and render this out. So just press Control S, save it, and go to render, render animation. And you can see here, in my preview over here, I can look at my motion blur. For example, I can press F12 and I can see my render result right here. So as I render this out, I can actually see the progress over here in the render result. So that's kind of why I have this here. So now I'm just going to go ahead and delete all of this and we're going to start over. Okay, so now let's go ahead and open up the low-res proxy again and set this to 309. And we're ready to go. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use the walk navigation method. Now we do need to change, it actually doesn't matter, we can set this to 309, it's fine. So we're going to press the play button and we're just going to use the middle mouse button to maneuver around. Now this will give us a bit more of a handheld look that's a bit more rough, and you'll do a bit more cleaning up to the keyframes, but it'll look a bit more handheld. So if you want that look, let's try it. Let's enable auto key and press the space bar and hold down the middle mouse button. Let's go to our camera here and let's see how it looks. Now it's very rough, you can see, but we're going to clean that up right now. we're going to make sure that all of our keys are selected by pressing A. Go to our decimate ratio, go to around 90, 93. And now I'm going to just go to decimate again, and we're going to choose maybe 50%, 54. I'm going to select these two keys here and press Shift R. That will redecimate them. Auto clamped, auto clamp. And we're going to delete this. Shift R to delete that, Shift R, which is repeat the operation. Let's go and play this back. Okay, so I didn't like how that was obviously not very fast. So we're going to scale that in. But anyway, this is the method I wanted to show. We're not going to redo this whole thing. I just wanted to show that, yes, you can use the middle mouse button method to get a cleaner result. And then just clean up your keyframes. It's not a cleaner result, but it's a bit more of a shaky result, which you may want. And then use the graph editor, the techniques here to transform your keys and delete them and decimate, all that stuff. So let's move on to the next shot. So now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to save a new file. We're going to save this as number 3 because we are going to edit a new shot that is actually number 3. So when I save a new shot, I then go over to my output and I change this as well to that. And then I delete this. I go to my proxies. I grab the shot that I want to play with. So we're going to bring this down to 1. And I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm not going to press the home button because it'll just make this a lot smaller and my waveform will get really small. So I'm just going to drag it out like that. We got 683 frames. So we know we probably want to do about 710. So there we go there. And then we're going to load up the proxy of number 3. And it's going to be 683. And again, auto refresh is automatically enabled there because we did not delete that image texture node. Now, we're going to select our sphere and make sure that all of our keyframes have been deleted, all of our animations. Same thing for our camera. So we're going to clear the keyframes, clear the keyframes. I like to set this to 90 to start, but it's whatever you want. Let's go and get rid of that auto key and again delete all of our keyframes that we just created. So now I'm going to show how we can start this shot and we're going to make the camera appear like we're slightly higher, but not in a nodal camera pan like this. We're going to actually create some perspective distortion to make it appear in a very subtle way that the camera is higher than it really is by using the sphere. See? It makes it look as if we are higher because of these lines here changing perspective. Now we'll also combine that with a nodal camera pan that will create a pretty convincing, believable result. But again, it needs to be subtle. Alright, so let's go and start that right now. We'll just go and use the method where we do the, like the walk method, or where we use the middle mouse button. So let's go and get started. Here we go. Alright, that's it. Let's go and select our camera. You can see we've got all these keyframes here. Let's go ahead and set our end frame to 683. We don't need that little second at the end there. Let's go and we've got all of our keys selected. Let's go to decimate up to about 95 or so. There we go. Looking pretty good. We have quite a bit busy keyframes over there. Let's go and delete those. We already know those are going to be a bit of a nuisance. Let's delete this. Actually, auto clamp that. And then Control R to auto clamp, or Shift R I should say, to repeat that operation. Let's bring this back. Auto clamp. Now, we need to animate our sphere in a minute, but first I'm trying to clean up my keys. Alright, so I want to move this a little bit higher. And then let's delete that key right there. And let's also make this happen just a little bit quicker. And let's select these two and auto clamp. Let's also auto clamp this. And then let's rotate this key here. Alright, so let's go and get to the portion that actually matters, because you probably are not at this moment interested in this. I want to show you the animation of here. So let's go and select the sphere. We can use auto key, it's fine. So we're going to go up. Now this is going to be a very, very subtle effect. There it is, and we're going to go ahead and continue on. Now I'm just going to go and select the sphere and change this to 0. And so let's see how it looks. Press home to see the keys themselves. As you can see, because this line here is changing perspective very slightly, you can create the illusion that the camera is a bit higher than it is. Let's go and make that illusion a little bit more pronounced by going up in the z-axis just a little bit more. You don't want to overdo it though, you have to be careful. That's a bit much. Let's go and drag this like that. So anyway, that's the idea. In my opinion, Blender is the best way to animate 360-degree footage, because you can actually animate the sphere. And of course, I feel like the graph editor is a lot more easier to use in Blender than, say, Fusion in DaVinci Resolve. I just feel more comfortable in Blender. And I just feel that it will give you better results. It takes a little bit more effort, but once you really get the hang of it, you will be able to quickly animate 360-degree shots. I'm just trying to explain it in this tutorial. That's why I'm very slow. So anyways, I hope this helps, and thank you for watching.